www.bayhillnews.net.
www.bayhillnews.net is the parent body of Bay Hill News Network. We do Facebook Live for church service, funeral service, lecture, sporting activity. For more, contact at bayhillnewsnetwork@gmail.com or call 1784-529-8340.
Now with ice cold local juices to go with our rich and tasty authentic Vincentian meals made affordable, it's the award-winning Phoenix Kitchen, open 7 days with extended hours on Friday and Saturday. Juices included Marby, lemon lime, passion fruit, bell apple, golden apple, cherry, mango, Marby, linseed, carrot, beetroot, fruit punch, and sea moss. For further information, call 455-1280. That's right, a bigger meal awaits you now with fresh, cold local juices. Phoenix Kitchen. Let the phoenix arise in you.
Great news! Spectra Plus is now rolling out internet and TV services in St. Lucia and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Yes, better service and better prices from the new and improved Spectra Plus. Spectra Plus TV plans for $59.99 per month, VAT included. Adult TV 3 channels plus $29.99. For more information, call 1784-534-2551 or 1784-532-2501. Fast, reliable broadband and television services for your home or business. Spectra Plus TV Internet better.
www.bayhillnews.net is the parent body of Bay Hill News Network. We do Facebook Live for church service, funeral service, lecture, sporting activity. For more, contact at bayhillnewsnetwork@gmail.com or call 1784-529-8340.
Looking for a place to relax with natural cool breeze and friendly surroundings? Then check the Bay Hill Tree Bar, located at Bay Hill Cane Garden. We have everything a bar will have. We also sell 20-pound cooking gas at the Bay Hill Tree Bar. Ship your barrels and household effects to St. Vincent and the Grenadines with SVG Direct. Jumbo barrels $70, medium $60, and small $50. We ship anything, name it, we ship it. Vehicles and more. Local agent, Adams Customs and Shipping Agency, 3rd floor, Baines Building, Kingstown, SVG. Telephone 1784-458-1328. In Canada, contact Michael 647-569-3285. Jumbie 647-657-7362. Remember, it's free pickup at your convenience, 7 days per week, anywhere in the Greater Toronto area with SVG Direct.
Nice Radio's Kalulu presents Just Another Look. Just Another Look is an innovative, exciting, albeit decidedly provocative and yes, certainly controversial, socio-political analysis of issues of a local, regional and international nature. Just Another Look is heard only on Nice Radio, first aired on Saturdays at 6 p.m. with repeat broadcasts on Sundays at 9 p.m. You can catch us on the World Wide Web, www.niceradio.info. You can also find us on Facebook and YouTube. I am, of course, Keith Joseph. Today, dear friends, is Saturday. It is the 6th day of March 2021. Welcome to another edition of your favorite program, Just Another Look. It was 15 years ago today that St. Vincent and the Grenadines woke up to the news that the naked body of radio and entertainment personality turned social and then political activist Glenn Jackson was found in the back of a car in Cane Garden with a single gunshot wound. Yes, it was 15 years ago. Monday, the 6th of March, 2006, was a day when time virtually stopped in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The news of Glenn Jackson's gruesome death sent shockwaves all across St. Vincent and the Grenadines and all across the Vincentian diaspora. Glenn Jackson, the ever popular booming voice, had been stilled. He was murdered. Glenn Jackson was immensely popular at the time of his death. But the road to the popularity that he eventually enjoyed was long in coming. It did not happen overnight. Glenn Jackson was in teaching for a short while before going into radio at NBC Radio 705. He was in cadets. And he became an entertainment promoter and other things along the way. His popularity grew as he matured. You know, we are today remembering Glenn Jackson because of the role he played in Vincentian social, cultural, and political life. Someone who, in his brief sojourn with us here on earth, gave so much of his time, of his energy to St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And to the Unity Labour Party at a time that was most critical in its struggle to access governance in this country. While at NBC Radio 705, Glenn Jackson's popularity came initially not so much as a radio personality per se, but as the man who also had much interest in entertainment. And he tried to bring that entertaining spirit to his radio programs. And many will recall him ending his radio programs at 7:05 as "I am and always will be your friend, Glenn." And that resonated with people because indeed many sought him out to be a friend. And more people sought him out, the more and more he took on new roles in Vincentian society. We are not sure how many people will today remember that it has been 15 years since Glenn Jackson has left us. Glenn created Studio 99, his promotion entity, his entertainment promotion entity. And his promotion of entertainment led him to start and be part of the NBC Radio Caroling competition. And there are many who, while having known of him and his desire to be engaged in entertainment, there are many who knew him because of that Christmas caroling competition. NBC Radio, Glenn Jackson, Bernard John, and others took just outside the radio station, the grammar school, the steps of the grammar school, and started the Christmas caroling competition. Like most things that start small, eventually it became a major cultural feature in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. It helped build Glenn Jackson's popularity in this country. And at the time of his foray into the Christmas caroling competition, Glenn Jackson did not appear to be political in the narrow political party sense. He was receptive to whatever was happening in Vincentian politics without necessarily becoming involved. And he used his popularity to build that Christmas caroling competition. He was able to get the then Prime Minister James Mitchell to have his government involved in the Christmas caroling competition. So there you had James Mitchell, John Horn, and others. John Horn, of course, of the Kingston Chorale. But it was part and parcel of who Glenn Jackson was, his capacity to get people involved in the things that he was doing. And bringing the parliamentarians, bringing the government to participate in the Christmas caroling was something that the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines enjoyed. In the beginning, there was little of the tribalistic politics that we have today. And so people went and they had fun watching the parliamentarians. Some, of course, better at it than others. But he got them there. And the popularity of the event grew. So much so that the NBC grouping, Bernard John and others, realized that this event can be an annual fundraising activity. And the proceeds can be used for charitable causes. Remember that the National Society of the Blind was at one point among the recipients of some of those funds to help in the enhancement of their facility at French's Gate. Eventually, the event outgrew the grammar school steps and ended up at the Victoria Park, the big yard, as it were, the major entertainment center. And then eventually, years later, it ended up at the hard courts at the Annesvale Sports Complex. But it was an important part of the Vincentian entertainment scene that brought new life to the Christmas season. And people looked forward anxiously to the annual caroling competition. The caroling competition became part and parcel of Glenn Jackson. Became part and parcel of Glenn Jackson's legacy in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Yes, he did other shows, but the annual Christmas caroling competition was something that people enjoyed in a way that was significantly different from any of the other entertainment packages with which he associated himself and his name. And many would suggest that initially that became part and parcel of his brand. But Glenn Jackson was much more than that. Much more than that. He became a social activist over time. And that social activism, that use of his voice from the radio, from the entertainment shows, allowed him almost naturally to move into social activism. And that social activism improved, increased as his popularity as a radio personality and an entertainer increased. You know, it was Glenn Jackson who once challenged the then general manager of the St. Vincent Brewery, Mr. Vaz. They had a public challenge. Glenn used his radio personality popularity to challenge Mr. Vaz. And it was agreed then that they would walk around the streets of Kingstown to celebrate the outcome of the challenge. And sure enough, they did. And it brought him additional popularity because, of course, it was the brewery. It became also for the brewery a major marketing pitch. And so his engagement with the brewery enhanced that image, just as his engagement with the National Lottery, what is now the National Lotteries Authority, also became important. So that eventually he was commissioned by the National Lottery to assist in the promotion of the lottery's games. Of course, one of the contradictions of that period was that he was engaged to promote the sale of the lottery games at a time when the lottery game did not need any promotion. In other words, if you retrace the history, you'd realize that when the games, the prize jackpot was low, that's when you needed the support, because if someone won when the prize money was low, you may not have had enough bets to be able to cover the jackpot. The dance couldn't pay for the light. And yet the lottery engaged Glenn Jackson when the jackpots were very large. And which seems so contradictory, because they were large, the people were going anyway. But Glenn Jackson would be around encouraging people, talking to people, what you think about the jackpot, etc., etc. And so his popularity increased as a result of his association with the National Lottery. That association, of course, also led to the National Lottery being one of the primary sponsors of his annual Christmas caroling competition. May seem contradictory, but that is how it went. And then something happened. As Glenn Jackson's social activism grew, and he became more popular, Glenn Jackson was rather unceremoniously removed from NBC Radio 705. And some may recall that it angered him because it hurt him. Because he felt at the time he was losing a major connection that he had with the Vincentian people. And he wanted to know, he was bothered as to why exactly was he moved. He thought he had a relationship with the likes of a James Mitchell, who was the Prime Minister at the time, and others within the New Democratic Party government. And for weeks he walked around with the letter in his pocket, showing it to and speaking about it to as many people as were willing to listen, because he was so pained by what had happened. But Glenn Jackson's popularity, his love for the media, and the fact that he had confidence in himself as a media personality allowed him to transition readily as he moved into Hits FM. Started the program Hard Hits. Hard Hits. And the name was important because that's what it was. Hitting you hard. That was the nature of the individual. He saw an opportunity to hit hard. And then he moved from Dorchester Hills, Hits FM, to the newly established We FM, with Jules Williams and the likes. And he started the Shake Up program. Shake Up. So the Hard Hits was the beginning of an enhanced social activist aspect of Glenn Jackson's life. It was going to take him into another realm. And many may suggest that it may well have reflected his own transformation into activism. Perhaps an opportunity for him to challenge that hurt that he felt of having been unceremoniously moved from 705. But acknowledging his popularity and allowing that popularity to grow even more by the topics that he addressed, by the way in which he went about dealing with those topics. He created a niche. He created a niche for himself and made talk radio immensely popular. Immensely popular. And people wanted to get onto the Shake Up program. Everywhere people wanted to listen to the Shake Up program every day because Glenn was there to shake things up. And he really did. Many may have thought that he was fearless. Employers, people in different positions in the society were quite uncomfortable because they were not sure that on any given day, they and whatever they were doing wouldn't feature on the Shake Up program. They knew the extent to which people around the country and in the diaspora were listening to Glenn Jackson on the Shake Up program. And many of them were badly shaken by Glenn Jackson on that program. And to the average man in the street, there was a voice for them. They associated themselves with the messaging coming from the mouth of Glenn Jackson. It was commonplace for someone to call in to Shake Up and make a complaint to Glenn Jackson about something that happened with them, maybe at the job or elsewhere. And Glenn would respond, is that what happened? Hold on a minute, hold on. And then he would live call the employer or whoever was mentioned in the complaint. Of course, the person would not have known for most of the time that he or she was live. And so Glenn would challenge the individual on the complaint that he's received and push the individuals back against the wall. And the people loved it. They loved him for it because they felt he was taking up the cause of the little man. Of course, that approach to talk radio was significantly different. It was not commonplace in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, but he made it commonplace. He literally transformed talk radio. You know, people who got into talk radio listening to Gutta Perk out of Barbados, which was coordinated by Reverend Andrew Hatch, were accustomed to a more somber approach. You may call Andrew Hatch on Gutta Perk, raise some concerns. If he did not have the answer, he would tell you he would investigate, and a day or two later, he would come back with a response. He didn't take sides, but he had a more somber approach to things. Glenn was literally to shake things up. And he shook it up. With both hands, he shook up the business community in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. He shook up people in their comfortable social classes and other organizations. And as his popularity grew, so did his persona. So did his fearlessness. So did his feeling of possessing power through the medium of the radio. And he thrived on that. He relished the fact that people would bring him information that he would then be able to use to make his show something dynamic, something inviting, something aggressive, something that many people feared. Many people feared. The average man in the street loved it. They loved Glenn Jackson's shake-up because they felt that finally there was someone in the society in a position to bring into the public domain things that were happening that they felt may have been unjust or that they felt needed public ventilation and public discourse. Some thought that Glenn Jackson's approach was reckless. Some, schooled in journalism, felt that that was not journalism. But that didn't bother Glenn Jackson. He felt he had a commitment. And interestingly, the longer the program ran, the more people became involved, is the more Glenn Jackson was emboldened to do what he was doing. That is how his social activism transitioned into political activism. The power of his voice on radio, his fearless approach to addressing topics and issues and individuals and organizations appealed to the broad cross-section of Vincentians. The strategy used by Glenn Jackson, therefore, brought fear to many, particularly those of the employer class, but found immense favor with the masses of Vincentians who relished the fact that finally someone in a position to expose what they saw as important, what they saw as unjust, what they may have seen as hypocritical, allow them to challenge the status quo. Because there was someone willing to plead their case, to listen to their voice, to take on board their issues, and to bring it out all on air. All on air. There's a level of discomfort in many different quarters. But among the masses, there was a relief because they could bring their issues forward. Politicians in opposition to the ruling New Democratic Party found Glenn Jackson gradually become a willing ally. And over time, they made capital of the access that he gave them to the public. Glenn Jackson was immediately seen by the opposition as an opportunity for them to reach the masses and to use the shaking up of the status quo that Glenn Jackson was doing to reach and achieve their political ends and facilitate their political ambitions. They understood only too well the extent to which Glenn Jackson was also becoming consumed by his own popularity. The fact that many people, many more people, wanted to be Glenn's friend because they felt that they could easily bring him information that he would use on his shake-up program. And the more he shook up the status quo, the more popular he became with the politicians in opposition, as well as the average man in the street, the average member of the Vincentian electorate. You see, there are a few things that happened in Glenn's life that helped in his radical transformation. His popularity as an activist grew immensely when he took up the plight of the nation's banana farmers. With the changes that were taking place in Europe, with the European Union seemingly desirous of moving away from preferential treatment by former colonizing powers with their former colonies, such as England with our bananas, England with sugar from Guyana and Jamaica and Barbados, and a whole lot of other things. But for us in St. Vincent and the Grenadines and the farmers in the Windward Islands under the WINFA banner found themselves being challenged on the European front by two major companies, Dole and Chiquita. Chiquita in particular, but Dole in a number of other areas in agriculture. And they were being pushed, and they were pushing for a change in the banana trading regime that would negatively have impacted, and eventually did negatively impact, the Windward Islands banana trade. And so Glenn joined with the banana farmers of St. Vincent and the Grenadines and started a campaign so that the names Dole and Chiquita became household names in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And the banana farmers in this country were given a forum by Glenn Jackson, who used his Shake-Up program to galvanize their cause and to help them in mobilizing the masses of Vincentians to understand the challenges that they were facing and the challenges that those changes posed to the Vincentian economy and the economies of the Windward Islands. And so Glenn Jackson got them onto the streets. Got them onto the nation's streets, challenging Dole and Chiquita, challenging the mighty US, challenging the Europeans. They, of course, lost both the battle and the war. But Glenn Jackson emerged as something of an icon in Vincentian activism. The blending of his social activism and now his political activism catapulted him onto a new level in Vincentian politics, in Vincentian social life. Here was a man who used his radio personality, his radio voice, his charisma, his growth in entertainment to bring the nation together in a way that had not been done for a very, very long time. And that pushed him onto a new level. Again, his own ego, filled with that newfound set of accolades. He did not rest on his laurels. He kept looking for issues that would resonate with the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And there were many available. The next issue for him was taking on the telecommunications giant, Cable and Wireless. There were all sorts of issues with Cable and Wireless. And Glenn Jackson used his Shake-Up program to allow Vincentians to tell their stories. Tell your story about what you think about the way Cable and Wireless is treating you. Is it a matter of price gouging? Is it a matter of the monopoly that they had? Is it a matter of lack of care? Is it a matter of just utter disrespect and disregard for the average Vincentian who had little choice because there was no alternative? And he took that issue just as he had taken the banana issue and put the country in a tailspin. People were encouraged to take their phones from their homes and to walk with them to show Cable and Wireless their level of dissatisfaction, disgust, and disaffection with the way in which they were being treated. So in the heart of Kingston, there were people with their telephones dragging them through the streets. Matters not that they had to go back home and clean them and use them as the communication tool that they were accustomed to doing. But for that period of time when they were part and parcel of the process, they made their point. Glenn Jackson facilitated that. He challenged them to the very core. He pitted the masses against Cable and Wireless. And while Cable and Wireless was still trying to find people of color to put in positions of authority, or to at least have them appear to be in positions of authority to appease the black masses of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, it did not work. Because Glenn Jackson had so riled up Vincentians using the medium of his Shake-Up program to allow them to come out with all of their venom to make statements about a telecommunications giant that they think had lost the sense of care, was delivering what they perceived to be poor quality service, disrespect, and disregard for them. So clearly, any politician looking on would have understood that while he was not motivated by any particular political ideology, his growth as a media personality allowed him to become a very influential figure in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And politicians know how to use those type of people. It was only a matter of time. It was only a matter of time that the politicians watching on, and perhaps, in a sense, the New Democratic Party in government may have seen that and may have been able to forecast that that was something that was possible, and so they had released him from 705. To the opposition, Unity Labour Party, they were looking for somebody other than Gonzalez and his charisma to help give the party the impetus that it required in order to make its move. Because while the socialists, the leftists, and whoever else that were associated with UPM and MNU and whatever else wanted to be able to have the masses as readily influenced by them as Glenn Jackson was able to influence them, they were never able to make it. To rise and fall, rise and fall. But here was an individual, Glenn Jackson, who had gradually built himself up into something of a communications icon in terms of his relationship with the people and his capacity to use the media to make that strong connection with the masses. This was the ideal candidate. Not to run for office, but to become the mouthpiece for the organization. Glenn Jackson, dear friends, grew increasingly political as his popularity grew. There were times he appeared incensed with the then ruling New Democratic Party, in part because he may still have been hurt by the way he was removed from NBC Radio 705. That may well have been with him all of the time. And when the opposition Unity Labour Party narrowly lost the elections in 1998, you may recall that the then leader, Vincent Beach, himself hurt at having led the party yet again into an election where he lost. The party lost. Vincent Beach, so incensed himself, declared that he won the popular vote. The party won the popular vote. And therefore, he felt that there was some right to access of governance that was not anywhere founded in the constitution of the country. Not anywhere. But he was making that case and recognizing that Michel will not go back to the polls. Recognizing that he had lost what he perceived to be his opportunity to become prime minister of this country, he declared he would make the country ungovernable. He was not just talking about him, he was talking about the party would make the country ungovernable. Remember, at the time that he made the pronouncement, Gonzalez sat quietly and said nothing. It was more Vincent Beach, Ken Boye, Stanley Storky John. Gonzalez was very quiet. If you know Gonzalez and his political savvy, he has timing. For him, timing is everything in politics. And so he sat there and allowed them to go on and go on and go on, biding his time, looking for the opportune moment, because you know we always call him a political opportunist. He may think otherwise, but that's how we have always labeled him. Biding his time, looking at the dynamics of what was playing out. Beach vowed that he and his party would make the country ungovernable. In many respects, dear friends, Glenn Jackson may well have played a major role in helping that Unity Labour Party behave in a manner thereafter that to this day a number of Vincentians view as having helped make the country ungovernable and ultimately move over to the Unity Labour Party. Remember, dear friends, Glenn began to become consumed by his own popularity, by his own sense of influence, by his own sense of power. When Hurricane Lenny, what we call the left-hand hurricane, because unlike most hurricanes that affect the Caribbean, they come from the east, going west. Lenny came from the west. Yeah? So when Hurricane Lenny, the left-hand hurricane as it became known, passed by St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Glenn Jackson was unaware that it was such a powerful storm. In fact, he didn't even know that it was something called Lenny. And early on the morning of the 17th of November 1999, Vincentians woke up to heavy rains. And heard the booming voice of Glenn Jackson on radio, speaking about the huge waves that were destroying at the time some of the newly completed buildings at the Kingstown cruise ship berth. That's what they woke up to. And people were calling one another. You hear Glenn? Turn on to Glenn. That was the level of his popularity. And seemingly confused with political venom for the New Democratic Party, Glenn Jackson enunciated a view while doing his commentary on what was happening by virtue of natural disaster. He enunciated a view that remains part of his legacy. He dared to suggest to the nation that what we were seeing in terms of the behavior of the weather and the waves lashing, rising up in the sky and falling down and removing parts of the roof of the buildings at the cruise ship berth, he dared to suggest it was God seeking revenge. God wreaking vengeance on the New Democratic Party for their wickedness. That was what Glenn Jackson had to say. That is what he was projecting in the wee hours of the morning to the nation, to his listenership. That what you were watching was God wreaking vengeance for the evil, wicked ways of the New Democratic Party government. He was in his element, literally gloating over the destruction of something that was too and still is part of the economic development strategy of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the cruise ship berth. And so those who were in opposition, those who felt that they should have had some sort of right to rule by virtue of having had the majority in the election, the majority, those who felt then that they had the majority, shared in the gloating that God had been wreaking revenge and vengeance on St. Vincent and the Grenadines because of the New Democratic Party. That was the messaging that emerged. That was the messaging. No one at the time in the Unity Labour Party, in the opposition, attempted to suggest that this was wrong, that this was unfortunate. And it went on and on and on until somebody called and says, Glenn, the same thing happening in Layou. The little piece of wharf has been destroyed. gas station is under threat because it was on the seaside. And then he got a call telling him the same thing was happening in Barralee. And then some people called and says they were listening to information coming from around the Caribbean. And Grenada is having the same problem. And then they heard that St. Lucia was having the same problem. And so it went on. That allowed us a respite from the shenanigans and the politicizing of what was clearly a natural disaster. But the politicians in opposition said nary a word to contradict Glenn Jackson's interpretation. That is why we always talk about the way in which politicians in the Caribbean have used religion conveniently. It was God wreaking havoc on St. Vincent and the Grenadines. He didn't know then that it was a region-wide issue. He didn't know then that it was Hurricane Lenny. And they did not seek to suggest otherwise. Even after that, to this day, 22 years later, the Unity Labour Party has never taken back that period. Never apologized. Glenn Jackson, true to his death, never apologized either for his reading of a situation of a natural disaster. You try now that the Unity Labour Party is in office and see what response you will get if you tried that same kind of rhetoric. The New Democratic Party is now saying they're in the majority. What does the minority leader tell them? Watch his behavior in Parliament. Watch his behavior in Parliament that we played for you, that we quoted on a previous program, and we played the tape for you to hear. The shoe is on the other foot now. Yeah? No, they don't care about minority. They have an explanation as to why they didn't win the majority vote. In 1998, they didn't want to hear any such argument from the New Democratic Party. But Glenn Jackson, consumed with his own political venom, his own issues, and a sense of possessing power and influence, trumpeted on a natural disaster, trying to convince the Vincentian populace that it was about God wreaking vengeance on a wicked, evil, corrupt New Democratic Party. Can the NDP make a similar claim these days? You be the judge. But Glenn was in his element that moment. And it's only when he started receiving calls from Layou and Barralee about similar weather and destruction, he apparently took it all to be an endorsement of his politico-religious stance, until, of course, he heard that it was region-wide. That's our politics, you know. That is the Glenn Jackson. That is his legacy. And so we can tell you on the 15th anniversary of his death, it wasn't all plain sailing, it wasn't all hunky-dory. This was the nature of the man. And his evolution into political activism and political prejudice. You see, through to the time of his death, Glenn Jackson never apologized for the seeming intransigence wrought upon the Vincentian people on that fateful day in November 1999. To this day, dear friends, the ULP leadership and the ULP minions have never recanting on their gloating over Glenn Jackson's malicious mischaracterization of a natural disaster. A disaster that cost this country millions in damage and changed the landscape in parts of this country, particularly Layou, forever. But Glenn Jackson's next foray was to become a major voice for change in this country, and a major voice and spokesperson ultimately for the Unity Labour Party. He became a facilitator, a provocateur of sorts. And his seeming attempt to engage in political analyses may well have revealed his own immaturity and naivety in things political. Some of you may recall, dear listeners, the occasion when Gonzalez seemingly upset at some of Glenn Jackson's comments, chided the activists, and then informed the people that sometimes you have to get into the gutter with them. Sometimes you have to get into the gutter with them. He was putting Glenn on notice. You may think yourself popular. You may well be popular. But if you're working with us, careful. Don't be pointing a finger at us the way you think you may have been able to do it elsewhere. But Glenn Jackson was so anxious to see the backs of Mitchell and the New Democratic Party that in spite of his own challenges with Gonzalez and others in the Unity Labour Party, he remained a willing and pliant opportunist for the cause of the ULP. Glenn helped in the mobilization of people, the mobilization that eventually emerged as the street protests of April and May 2000. It was Glenn Jackson on the air, mobilizing the masses, and Julian Francis and his A-team on the ground, ensuring that every morning access into Kingstown was blocked on the leeward and windward side and through Mespo. They made that possible. And so the continuing chest thumping that we hear from the minority leader about a roadblock revolution and an apparent taking credit for a roadblock revolution. And then his comments in Parliament to Friday, but you try that, is all political mamagism. Go back to April, May 2000. Where was he when Julian Francis and his A-team were mobilizing material to block the roads? He may have gone frequently to Glenn Jackson's radio station and the radio station WFM in order to get on the program. But don't be so anxious, comrade, to take the credit for the success of the roadblock. It was not a roadblock revolution, contrary to your own characterization of it. It will never be recorded in history as a roadblock revolution. But each time you say it, it brings to the fore your own lack of understanding of what constitutes a revolution. Just as you characterize the changes in education as an education revolution, and you have CARICOM repeating this garbage about a wellness revolution. Revolution might be in your head, comrade, but you ain't know nothing much about it. But you know, Glenn Jackson's utilization of the media to galvanize support for the protestations of April and May 2000 was the start of a new phase in his life. A new phase as Glenn Jackson, the political activist. He was well aware of the significant growth in his listenership at the time, of the anxiety of people after having given the Unity Labour Party the majority at the polls in 1998. He saw the opportunity to make that count against the New Democratic Party. And so he trumpeted the cause of the Unity Labour Party. And he tried at times to establish some sort of balance. But given the dynamics of what was happening and how fast it was happening, he was not able to control it. And in many respects, he became something of a plaything for the politics of the Unity Labour Party. On the one hand, he wanted his political persona to grow. On the other hand, he wanted to maintain some sense of objectivity. He was unable to strike that balance. He was also aware that his visibility was growing. And he was aware that once James Mitchell had signed on to the Grand Beach Accord and agreed to general election being fought on his NDP government before 31st March of 2001, he knew that he could and would play a major role in getting the NDP out of office and bringing the Unity Labour Party into office. It had not been lost on Glenn Jackson that in practical political terms, the odd thing was nothing but a farce. It had not been lost on Glenn Jackson that in practical terms, the odd thing was nothing but a farce. There was nothing that could render the odd thing into a political entity beyond the fanciful ideas of a decadent, fossilized few that Just Another Look continues to label to this day the ruminants of the left and the leftovers. Glenn Jackson understood only too well the opportunity afforded him to help set the stage for political payback to the New Democratic Party for having ever thought that they had cast him out into the wilderness. Indeed, he recognized that they had facilitated his social and political transformation. Glenn Jackson, then operating out of a small hole opposite the General Post Office on Halifax Street, started an afternoon special program to engage listeners on their way home from work, even as many were slowly moving in traffic. That program made a huge difference. They had him in the morning. They had him in the afternoon. He had them where he wanted them. In the end, that second program proved to be the icing on the cake. The position on Halifax Street opposite the post office facilitated a number of things. One, it allowed Glenn to be on the pavement in Kingstown, the capital city, visible to and engaged by and engaged with passers-by at will, getting them on air, airing their views on the politics of the day and influencing listeners. 2, it allowed Glenn Jackson to have Ralph Gonsalves in the public with great frequency. They could see him, they could touch him, they could talk to him, and he could hug them. It allowed an ever-increasing number of people to see and be greeted by Gonsalves, more than would otherwise have been the case. Finally, it enhanced the visibility and the popularity at one fell swoop of Glenn Jackson, Ralph Gonsalves, and the Unity Labour Party. You see, we remember Glenn Jackson on his 15th anniversary of his death, because we understood Glenn Jackson's role in having Ralph Gonsalves where he is today. They don't seem to remember that during the course of the years, they hardly mention him at all. They hardly mention him at all. The hapless NDP had no response to the overtures being made by Glenn Jackson. James Mitchell opted to stay on in the leadership of the party until August, and as Prime Minister until October of 2000. Big mistake. Eustace, his successor, was dealt a blow in his first general elections as Prime Minister for just having about 3.5 months to prepare the party for elections. Was James Mitchell therefore an accomplice of sorts? You be the judge. You be the judge. Because if you were literally forced into accepting the Grand Beach Accord when you did, and you could have agreed then to your party having elections by a stipulated period coming out of that accord, and then you hold on to power, not recognizing that your own popularity had so rapidly declined that you had lost the popular vote in 1998 and forced to acquiesce to a Grand Beach Accord where you alone went to represent your party. You didn't carry any deputy or anybody because you love all of them the same way, so you leave all of them home. And then you hold on to power, you hold on to leadership. What did you expect the party to do in the elections if you give them 3.5 months to prepare? What are you, the Wizard of Oz? Or just a wizard? Eustace never had a chance. Glenn Jackson trumpeted the Unity Labour Party to the extent that their satisfaction with his performance on air led to him being elevated to their chief spokesperson on the political platform, their master of ceremonies. Wielding his magic, the popular voice, I am and always will be your best friend Glenn, suddenly telling you this is the party of his choice. This is the party with whom you should go to bed. The average Vincentian saw Glenn Jackson as much responsible for the victory of the ULP in 2001 as Ralph Gonsalves and Julian Francis. That is why they were so hurt with his death. That is why they were so hurt with his death. But they're not hurt enough to have the party honor him in an appropriate manner. That is the naked reality of Vincentian politics. They were hurt of how they treated Glenn Jackson. They were hurt that they couldn't find his killer. They were hurt in a number of ways, but they weren't hurt enough to force the party to recognize him for his sterling contribution to what they were able to achieve. The appointment of Glenn Jackson as Gonsalves' press secretary was perhaps seen as inevitable by many in the ULP. To the astute analyst, however, it was viewed as necessary and opportune, not inevitable. Having Glenn Jackson as his press secretary may well have been intended by Gonzalez as a mechanism by which to dictate Glenn Jackson's political behavior. That, however, was never possible. The truth will one day be revealed as to why Glenn Jackson never traveled with Gonzalez as press secretary to any international destination after that initial foray to Canada in the early months after the election victory in 2001. That's the only time he went away with him as press secretary. The truth will also be revealed as to why Gonzalez himself has not been to Canada in an official capacity since that time. That truth will also emerge. And Gonzalez's stance in respect of not fully engaging Canada, a long-standing ally of the Caribbean countries, remains a mystery to some who refuse to engage their critical thinking skills, especially when they consider how much Canada has assisted Caribbean countries in a variety of areas and for decades. Glenn Jackson's last hurrah with the ULP was really his platform performances during the elections campaign in 2005. By the beginning of 2006, Glenn Jackson had begun to experience his own personal transformation and served up the occasional hint on some of his programs. Something was happening that bothered him. Something he felt had tied him up, twisted him up. Something was bothering him. Glenn Jackson's murder was followed by the emergence of information, apparently credited to the U.S. Embassy in Barbados. Documentation surfaced from WikiLeaks cables, one of which made mention of Glenn Jackson. According to the aforementioned document, WikiLeaks cable number 554, speaking of Glenn Jackson, it said, quote, Post was particularly fortunate to identify Jackson's value and cultivate a relationship that made him our most important contact, end of quote. Post is supposed to be somebody working in the Secret Service from the United States. Post was particularly fortunate to identify Jackson's value and cultivate a relationship that made him our most important contact, end of quote. Glenn Jackson's death gave rise to some bothersome moments. One, the News newspaper revealed a photo of the scene where Glenn Jackson's body was found in the car, which showed that there was a police cordoning off of the car. Crime scene. But the picture revealed that the government officials were inside of the cordoned area. Inside of the cordoned area. Right around the car, some perhaps even touching the car. Inside a cordoned off crime scene area. And this was particularly disconcerting because the area was supposedly being treated as an active crime scene by the police. Or was it? Was it? Two, for days on end, in the immediate aftermath of Glenn Jackson's death, rumors were rife. Rumors were rife about who killed him. Many seemingly deliberately so, putting out names of different individuals as possible murderers. Interestingly, Interestingly, one of the rumors targeted the host of Just Another Look as his murderer. And that led to numerous calls, many of which were threatening individuals associated with the host of Just Another Look. Eventually forcing the host of Just Another Look to engage the security firm Guardsman to protect him and his property. That happened in 2006. Were these rumors deliberate? Were they intended as distractions? Whatever they were, they added fuel to a smoldering fire. 3. Gonzalez was outside the country on official business. Yet, when he called in from out there, he seemed to suggest that it was an assassination. From all those miles, he seemed to suggest that it was an assassination. And some have asked for the basis on which such a suggestion could have come. 4. At Glenn Jackson's funeral service, his wife Suzanne appealed for justice. In the funeral service, she appealed for justice. And as fate would have it, she went on to insist that she did not want scapegoat justice. She wanted real justice. Not scapegoat justice, real justice. What prompted her to make that distinction then at Glenn Jackson's funeral service? Do you know? But importantly, from all appearances, even as we observe today, the 15th anniversary of Glenn Jackson's death, his wife, now former wife Suzanne, has got neither real justice nor scapegoat justice. She's gotten nothing by way of justice. 5. Following the arrest of Francis Williams for Glenn Jackson's murder, the Vincentian masses, those who loved Glenn, those who felt that he had done so much for the party and the government in office, came to Kingstown ready to do their own justice, to administer their own justice. The police in this country weren't quite sure how to treat the crowd that converged on Kingstown and the courthouse. When the police brought Francis Williams out of their vehicle, expecting a huge surge of the angry masses onto Francis Williams, instead, they got a sucking of teeth, rebuffs, disappointment, disenchantment, disgust, and everybody went their way, making the major comment, that nasty little boy there, he couldn't kill Glenn Jackson if he tried. Not that fella there. The crowd was disappointed that of all the possible suspects and all of the rumors and everything, the individual they brought to court, they could not convince the people, even as they just looked at him, that that could possibly have been the culprit, and the people left on their own. No mayhem, nothing besides disappointment, disgust. Glenn Jackson, dear friends, is dead. And in many respects, he has only been remembered by the Unity Labour Party he helped galvanize into office on the odd rather than the annual occasion. You know when they last remembered him? On the 6th of March 2016, 10 years after he had died. And it was Daffodil Small that initiated that memorial, because she was a longtime friend of Glenn Jackson. And so she asked for help so they could remember him on the 10th anniversary, and they had a prayer, they had prayers, they had wreath laying at the grave, etc., etc. At that time, former wife Susan was there, Glenn Jackson's mother, Ralph Gonzalez, Luke Brown, Blazer, Julian Small, Culture Man, Daffodil, Julian Francis. Ralph Gonzalez, of course. They were all there. Right? But note, at the time of their coming together for that 10th anniversary, typical ULP old talk about doing something in Glenn's honor. That is 5 years ago. 10 years after his death, they were talking about doing something in his honor. But from just another look's vantage point, clearly they were out of order. Because all of them must have known that in the immediate aftermath of Glenn Jackson's death, the same ULP government says that they were going to award a Glenn Jackson scholarship. And as far as we know here at Just Another Look, the only recipients of a Glenn Jackson scholarship was Skinny Fabulous. We know of no other person in this country to have received a Glenn Jackson scholarship. And we ask you, dear listeners, do you know what is the Glenn Jackson scholarship? Apart from the fact that we know one person got it, do we know what does it constitute? Do we know how do you get it? Do you know what monies are associated with it and what fields of endeavor? What do you know about the Glenn Jackson scholarship? And have you ever heard mention of the Glenn Jackson scholarship in the last 10 years? Have you ever heard anything of the Glenn Jackson scholarship in the last 10 years? After the first 10th anniversary of his death, here these bigwigs, the boys and them, get together, right? Only Daffodil was there that they're talking about. Okay? But all these others were there. And what we had to show? They were the ones saying they think they should do something for Glenn Jackson. Gonzalez, Francis, Brown, Blazer, Julian, Culture Man. 10 years after his death, they all seem to have forgotten too about the Glenn Jackson scholarship. They seem to have forgotten about that. So we ask you, dear listeners, are you aware of the Glenn Jackson scholarship? Do you know of anybody else who has gotten it? Do you know where the funds are for the Glenn Jackson scholarship, or where the funds are coming from? Because if anybody's supposed to give a Glenn Jackson scholarship, it should be the party, not the government. Because the party were the major beneficiaries, although they got into government thanks to Glenn's help. But what we are telling you, dear friends, is that Glenn is dead. They know he's dead. And so every now and again, it behoves them to suggest that, hey, remember Glenn was one of us, you know? And let's do something. And then they do nothing. So on this, the 15th anniversary of Glenn Jackson's death, we are saying to you, dear listeners, That is how they treat their own. Because at the end of the day, it's every man for himself and his family. Don't look to them for anything beyond that. Don't look for them for anything beyond that. Because it's not going to happen. That is how they treat their own. How do you expect them to treat others? That is why we remind you that the death or the disappearance of Dominic Gonzalez and Rashid Ibrahim do you know? But importantly, from all appearances, even as we observe today, the 15th anniversary of Glenn Jackson's death, his wife, now former wife Suzanne, has got neither real justice nor onto Francis Williams. Instead, they got a sucking of teeth. Is that Glenn is dead. They know he's dead. And so every now and again, it behoves them to suggest that, hey, remember Glenn was one of us, you know? And let's do something. And then they do nothing. So on this, the 15th anniversary of Glenn Jackson's death, we are saying to you, dear listeners, that is how they treat their own. Because at the end of the day, it's every man for himself and his family. Don't look to them for anything beyond that. Don't look for them for anything beyond that. Because it's not going to happen. That is how they treat their own. How do you expect them to treat others? That is why we remind you that the death or the disappearance of Dominic Gonzalez and Rashid Ibrahim 5,174 days ago in J8 VAX counts for nothing. And if you want to take time to read the lengthy, boring report that really said nothing, and that was presented to us as a report, then you understand what problems we have in this country. The disappearance of Suresh Lakram inside of 4 years after that on Thursday, the 5th of August 2010, called out from his day off to go and conduct a mercy mission flying J8 SXY, disappeared without a trace. Where is the report? Was his life not as valuable as anybody else's? But we got no report. We got no big Kakomemi report. His life meant nothing. And what we are saying to you today, dear friends, is that so too Glenn Jackson's life meant nothing. His death meant nothing to the Unity Labour Party leadership. Nothing. By their behavior, it meant nothing. That's why we are not surprised. And there was no interest really on the part of government to really do something about the Patricia Bowman issue being crushed to death in her own car on the 19th of September 2008. Because we ask you, and we ask the people involved, you remember that when Lou and them moved from St. Vincent and the Grenadines, because Lou's husband, Patty, required medical attention, and they moved to Canada. Remember that Lou left the business, the little business, the spot and the entertainment every Saturday, the big tent down at Indian Bay. on a property owned by Uncle Metro. The Bowmans were of the understanding from Uncle Metro that since they weren't using the land, as long as it wasn't being used, they could continue. And then you started hearing rumors. That's an NDP thing. Because the Bowmans supported the NDP, you see. And then you heard talk of members of the ULP being told, don't go there. That's a ULP thing, an NDP thing, etc., etc. And the next thing you know, the Bowmans were told, and they had to move. How did that come about? How did that come about? Ask yourself, dear listeners, what do you think transpired there? And do you think that our politics can be so petty that something as simple as that, having a Saturday function where people come and they eat local foods and drink and talk and lie on the side of a beach, that becomes sufficiently offensive that it has to be perceived or declared or rumored to be political, so much so that it ends up with the land still being vacant today, unused. But the Bowmans had to move. Just think of what that tells you about the state of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So it was not surprising that the death of Patricia Bowman, gruesome as it was, with the debris from somebody's house, somebody's wall falling and crushing her to death in her car, was left to her husband to try to make a case, in spite of the outcome of whatever inquest or investigation had been done. The DPP at the time, who we call Dr. Nolly Pross, said he didn't have what was required for him to go forward with the case. That is Colin Williams. He's now a judge over in Antigua and Barbuda. This is what we are, you know. This is what we have become as a country, as a nation. And people find ways of expressing their love for you more so at elections time than at any other time. People's lives do not matter. And the contributions of Glenn Jackson to the Unity Labour Party and the ULP government do not matter. What is politically expedient at any given point in time is all that matters. All that matters. Enough said. You've been listening to another edition of Nice Radio's Callaloo presentation, Just Another Look. Just Another Look is an innovative, exciting, albeit decidedly provocative, and yes, certainly controversial socio-political analysis of issues of a local, regional, and international nature. Just Another Look is heard only on Nice Radio. First aired on Saturdays at 6 p.m. Repeated on Sundays at 9 p.m. You can catch us on the World Wide Web, www.niceradio.info. You can check us out on Facebook and YouTube. I am, of course, Keith Joseph.
Ship your barrels and household effects to St. Vincent and the Grenadines with SVG Direct. Jumbo barrels $70, medium $60, and small $50. We ship anything, name it, we ship it. Vehicles and more. Local agent, Adams Customs and Shipping Agency, 3rd floor, Baines Building, Kingstown, SVG. Telephone 1784-458-1328. In Canada, contact Michael 647-569-3285. Jambi 647-657-7362. Remember, it's free pickup at your convenience 7 days per week anywhere in the Greater Toronto area with SVG Direct. Looking for a place to relax with natural cool breeze and friendly surroundings? Then check the Bay Hill Tree Bar, located at Bay Hill Cane Garden. We have everything a bar will have. We also sell Shell 20-pound cooking gas at the Bay Hill Tree Bar. Great news! Spectra Plus is now rolling out internet and TV services in St. Lucia and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Yes, better service and better prices from the new and improved Spectra Plus. Spectra Plus TV plans for $59.99 per month, VAT included. Adult TV 3 channels plus $29.99. For more information, call 1784-534-2551 or 1784-532-2501. Fast, reliable broadband and television services for your home or business. Spectra Plus TV, internet, better.
www.bayhillnews.net is the parent body of Bay Hill News Network. We do Facebook Live for church service, funeral service, lecture, sporting activity. For more, contact at bayhillnewsnetwork@gmail.com or call 1784